Hi, I'm Mark Bernard, and I'm here to talk to you about the NIST Cybersecurity Framework Introduction course that's being held at the MISTI Training Institute. We had a seminar back in April in New York, Manhattan, and our next seminar is going to be in Chicago, and we're hoping that you'll be able to join us. So to give you a little bit of insights into the course, I prepared this sort of introduction video just so that you can get a feel for what it's all about, what NIST Cybersecurity Framework's all about, all the considerations that you need to consider, and how you can prepare for the course, okay? So first of all, a little bit about my background. I have a rather large social media footprint. I have over 100,000 shares a year, and I'm in 199 countries around the globe. I've also managed many projects, including about 117 projects actually. I have over 4,000 skills, 5,000 skills, pardon me, endorsed on LinkedIn. And I've worked for a number of big companies. I've worked on red teams for IBM. I've worked for TD Bank. I've worked for Trimble, Mabel, a number of financial institutions. I've worked for nanotech as well, and other technologies, including governments. Over 114 projects, it's 117 now. Most of them have been in the financial sector, a lot of them in the government, manufacturing, technology, but also a number of splinter organizations, including healthcare, federal cloud service, transportation, pharmaceutical, legal services, etc., so forth. The coverage of those projects has varied. Some have been national, across the country. Some have been global, around the planet, and others are more regional. My skills were honed on the AS400, the most secure server on the planet that has never been hacked. Okay? And in fact, I did break it once, totally by accident, but I did break into it and bypass the access control system. And when that happened, IBM actually offered me a job at their plant to help them improve the security around it. But the box is very secure. I've also created a mind map for cybersecurity, which I'll be publishing a course on soon. It's covering a number of different areas. It's going to surpass the CISO type credentials and go beyond that, because I've been working in program management within cybersecurity for a long time, about 20 years now, and I have some insights that will help make you more effective, help you keep your job, or maybe earn a new job. Now, the course methodology. It's based on an adult training methodology, participatory learning activities, as well as knowledge transfer. There's a number of different areas that we touch on that are fundamental. Each lesson is kept to about 40 minutes. And of course, there's a number of activities to give you more hands-on experience. And the participatory learning is where the students actually get involved in the course. The 40-minute lesson cycle looks like this. This is a high-level summary. 10 minutes to prepare and open the class, 20 minutes to go over the materials, and then we have some written feedback as well as maybe post-tests. There are a number of different learning styles that we recognize, and that helps make our courses more effective. There's concrete experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, doing, and thinking. Those are two different ones. So those feed into each other. There's accommodators, divergers, there's simulators, converging. David Kloeb is the gentleman who did the research in the US on this learning style, and a lot of institutions of higher learning have been using it. Perception continuum. This is a very effective method, and we built it into our curriculum so that the students get the most out of the courses. Basically, there's 4 steps. You get knowledge, you understand what the NIST Cybersecurity Framework is all about. Then you understand it because we explain it to you. I sit in class with you. I'm your teacher. I will explain everything to you. If you have any questions at all, I will explain it to you. And then I'm going to give you some tools and techniques on how you can apply the NIST Cybersecurity Framework within your organization. Each student comes from a different background. We recognize that, and to try and accommodate those students, I have a special approach that will help them adapt the NIST Cybersecurity Framework to fit their organization. And finally, analysis. So that's the 4th level. There's actually 6 levels in Bloom's taxonomy, but our course is only designed to take you to application and analysis. This is all you need on the job. You can see application and analysis here. The higher levels that we're not including are evaluation synthesis. Those will be in more advanced classes. Those are for architects, and also for auditors, those types of roles. This is an explanation of it. I'll help students conduct their own skills gap assessment to see where are they today, what are they completely missing, what do they have some of, and then we can concentrate on closing those gaps during the course. I'll also blend in the approach to implementing this cybersecurity framework with a very popular framework for project management from the Project Management Institute, and it goes through 4 different stages: initiate, plan, execute, and close. And all while that's going on, there is a 5th element, that is control. The instructional objectives will be clearly defined, so the student knows exactly what they're going to achieve, what the outcome will be. We'll talk about the types of learning objectives as well as the elements of well-defined objectives. These are all built into the methodology. We may not actually sit in the class and explain how these work, but you'll get the course and the lessons with the specific goals and objectives. Elements of well-defined objectives include performance, conditions, and criteria. There will be a pre-test so that we can see where the students are today, where they're coming from, so that we can help give them the right information and knowledge so that they can find that useful and extend their knowledge. The framework consists of 5 groups: identify, protect, respond, detect, and recover. And we'll talk about those at great length. The table from the NIST Cybersecurity Framework looks like this. Again, it's 5 different sections or domains, and within that there's approximately 23 lessons. And we'll talk about each one, like asset management, the business environment, governance, risk assessment, etc., so forth. 23 lessons, and they're broken out like this. Participatory learning activities, including students will draft roles and responsibilities matrix, and we'll discuss those and talk about them within their respective organization. They'll create a conformity matrix and update it as we go through each of the 23 lessons. They'll also create CAPA, which is a term used in the quality management world, which we've integrated within this process. That's corrective action planning and preventative action planning. So where there are gaps, we'll create CAPAs. We'll also assess the current maturity of the program, because within the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, there are several different profiles that we'll discuss, again, at great length. And then we'll update a work breakdown structure that will be used for your project management planning. Documents look like this. You'll get these along with the course during your activities. We'll provide useful feedback, and hopefully we'll receive some positive feedback as well. We'll have an evaluation at the end of the course and expect the students will tell us how we did. There'll also be a post-test, and we'll test to see if the knowledge transfer process worked or not. This gives us an opportunity to also improve on the process that we have so that we can get better at what we do. And then we'll ask questions and answers, or we'll provide answers. You'll ask questions. Summary. So we'll review the lessons and the instructional objectives. We'll check the performance and the conditions and the criteria. See how that looks. Course tools, lessons, the reference model, all of these are included. The control frameworks, we'll talk about the matrix and how it fits into the reference model. There are a number of different control points. You can see I've totaled them up. There's 108 in total for the entire framework. We'll talk about how the NIST Cybersecurity Framework got created and what are the other acts that you have to take into consideration because they feed into the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, or they give the authority to the NIST organization to create these frameworks for the federal government in the U.S. And because of that, they have several other acts that have to be followed, such as the FISMA Act and the NIST Act, and also the NIST SP 800 53R4, and then came along the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. So there is a correlation. There's a linkage between all of them, and that's something that you need to appreciate and understand. Also, within the new version of the SP 853-4, there's a new program management section. So we may take some time and discuss this. This is not within the scope of the lesson, but certainly it's something that you should be aware of because it is coming down the pipe. Again, the legal obligations. FISMA Act feeds into the NIST Act, and the NIST Act gives NIST the authority to create the frameworks, such as the SP 853-4. Now, the SP 853-R4 references other standards like FIPS 200 and FIPS 199. And these are for tools and techniques such as encryption. We'll also talk about the legal obligations and how they are affected for the Information Security Management Act of 2002 and how it affects confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information, and how that also references FIPS 199. And we'll break down FIPS 199 and we'll talk about the different classifications of information, because this is all paramount. The classification schema is really what drives the level of control that gets implemented in the organizations. Now, a lot of the NIST cybersecurity framework vendors out there who are providing training won't go to the links that I will, because I'm very thorough. I was a compliance manager in government and a privacy and security officer in banking and also in government. And I've been through this process many times. So I'll give you exactly what you need to do and show you how to implement it, and you'll be wonderful. Now the NIST 853-R4 also has a number of sections, which I've listed here, and a total of 909 control points. So that's a lot. We'll talk about control points and why they're important in the mitigation of risk. We'll also talk about the relationship, because we talked about information classification. We didn't talk about SP 800-171, but that is the classification standard that was created by NIST. So we'll talk about that a little bit and help you understand how that fits into the big picture. And then there are other legal obligations. So there's a brand new one out there called FedRAMP, which a lot of organizations are going through who provide cloud services to the U.S. federal government. And again, FedRAMP feeds into FISMA Act, which feeds into the NIST Act, and so on and so forth. Now, changes recently, well, last year, to the NIST Cybersecurity Framework 1.1 version include some changes to detect and recover. Oh, pardon me. Changes were not affected under detect and recover. Changes to the identify included the supply chain. The supply chain is a huge vulnerability to most organizations, because you can have a nice, tidy, neat ship and well organized and well managed, but if your vendor gets a breach, which has happened many times in the news, as you probably imagine and you've read, then you're vulnerable. So that's been covered off. There are a number of control points that have been added for that, including conducting a risk assessment of the processes identified within the supply chain. Also looking at the information components, services, to identify, prioritize, and assess the cybersecurity supply chain risks, contracts, and suppliers within third-party partners, and implementation measures designed to meet objectives also need to be assessed. So there's a complete change. So there may be a vendor or supplier that's providing you services, but they may also have other vendors and suppliers involved in the process. So that has to be reviewed and mapped out. And we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll talk about flow down clauses and how you can pass legal obligations along to your vendors so that they apply the same level of control that you have in a legal sense. Your general counsel or your lawyers will probably be very interested in this. And then, of course, response and recovery planning. Now, another area that's going to be affected is the protect. So identify, identity management, authentication, and access control was updated. Now there's a number of new controls in there. So PRAC6, identities are proofed and bound to credentials and asserted. AC7, users, devices, and other assets are authenticated. And then there's a data security control that's been added. So that's a DS8, and that's identity checking mechanisms are used to verify hardware integrity. And then there's protective technology. So mechanisms, fail-safes, load balancers, etc., are implemented and achieved. This is kind of, the last one is more or less just making sure that it's reviewed. But most organizations already have these mechanisms in place. So it's just a matter of taking inventory and keeping track of them. Now, protect changes. This is how they fit into the overall framework. There's a number of control points. We'll discuss this in the class. The red items are the new ones. The same with under protect. And the same under protective technology. Now under respond analysis, there was a change. So AN5, processes are established to receive, analyze, and respond to vulnerabilities disclosed to the organization from internal and external sources. So there is a big emphasis in the NIST cybersecurity framework on creating relationships with organizations who are in the intelligence business, monitoring for threats and vulnerabilities in cybersecurity, and somehow integrating with them or working with them or maybe getting a subscription or something. So there's different ways to share knowledge, and of course you have to do it in a discreet manner, probably out of bound channels, so that it's not intercepted. Under analysis, this is where the control was added. Now, implementation tiers. Now, this is an interesting story. So the NIST cybersecurity framework suggests this: prioritize scope, orient, create a current profile, and the profiles are based on a number of elements we're going to discuss in a moment. Conduct a risk assessment, create a target profile, determine, analyze, prioritize gaps, and implementation action plan. Now, the profile tiers look like this. So they're really focused on three sets of processes, actually. So risk management processes, integrated programs, and external participation. And this is where we talked about the public and private organizations who band together to share cyber threat intelligence. Now, at the bottom of the scale is partially implemented. And then as it goes up, it's risk-informed, repeatable, and adaptive. So it's pretty straightforward. We'll talk about these in the class as well. This is a star chart. This just helps walk you through where you are today and where you need to be. And these are the details of the framework. And of course, with every framework, when you implement efficient, effective controls and not over controls, you tend to improve the resilience of the organization, which reduces defects and improves stabilization. Now, implementation of the controls. These are the controls that need to be implemented in order to achieve a maturity level 4. Physical devices and systems within the organization are inventoried. Identities and credentials are issued, managed, verified, revoked, audited, and authorized devices and users in process for authorized users, devices, and processes. AE1. Baseline for network operations and expected data flows for users and systems established and managed. This is a big to-do, okay? Doing data flow analysis within any organization is huge, depending on how many hops and how large the organization is and how far it spans around the world. Response planning is executed during and after an event. So this is incident management. This is where you have a security operations team who respond to any type of activity. It may not be a breach. It may be just some unusual activity that needs to be investigated. And then a recovery plan, and not in the sense of business continuity or disaster recovery. This recovery plan is in the sense of incident management. So how do you shut down the incident? How do you mop up the mess? How do you stabilize the environment and get it back to fully operational? Now, the NIST cybersecurity framework will try and drive your maturity level up within 1 year. It's been around since 2014. A lot of organizations haven't even adopted it, but it takes time. Now, normally, a security program, when you're implementing it, takes about 3 years to mature. So just a little heads up there. Excuse me. The implementation strategy, again, using the project management methodology, is the best way to go. Everybody understands that. Most organizations use the PMO to manage any sort of activities that involve change or transformation within the organization. So it just makes sense that you leverage the same framework that they do. The activities I mentioned before. This is the NIST Cybersecurity Framework approach that I recommend. It's not 8 steps, it's 10. Establish the scope, create a conformity matrix, create a list of assets, create the legal registry, create document and record registry, conduct risk assessments, create and execute communication strategy, establish internal audit, establish performance metrics, and then finally transfer knowledge and operational control. This is a little bit more thorough, and based on all the experience that I have over 20 years, this is the best way to go. This works every time. Now, within the course, we have lessons and exercises. We'll update the conformity matrix, which will also feed the capability and maturity matrix and roles and responsibilities, and also help us to identify those CAPAs, corrective and preventative action plans. And then that will help us determine what are the resources that are required to do the CAPAs. So we will create a work breakdown structure with a timeline and a project charter and Gantt chart to go along with that. These are the documents you'll get during the course. This is what will help you fill in. Capability and maturity, preventative action. This is a threat materialization chart. This is the risk universe, which we talk about a lot. A lot of people don't understand how risk works, but we're going to take a lot of time and explain it because risk is the language that the boardroom understands, but not operational risk. They need to understand risk in their context at the board level. The risk universe will help you explain that. And then we'll also talk about the technology stack and where the vulnerabilities are. Depending on if you're using a cloud environment, you may have infrastructure as a service or platform or software as a service. And we'll talk about how those vulnerabilities can be managed within the context of the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. Also help you build procedures. This is a very good procedure that I've been using for a long time, like 20 years, and it's completely compliant and conformant with a lot of other auditing exercises that go on within most organizations during the course of the year and at the end of the year. So for instance, your SAS 70, this will be compliant with that, as well as a number of other compliance activities. We'll also talk about the workflows. When does the governance committee need to be informed? What's the role of the chief cybersecurity officer? What's the role of the management experts and external parties? And how do they conduct these activities? So we'll do some workflows as well. And again, I mentioned earlier about the control points. I will go into details about why the control points are so important and why they're implemented. So if you're going from a level 1 with no knowledge or information at all about the NIST Cybersecurity Framework or about risk management or about any of this stuff, I'll be able to bring you up to speed so that you'll be an expert when you leave my course. And I mentioned the matrix as well, the control matrix. We'll talk about this. And also the integration of other best practices such as the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. And we'll walk through the NIST Cybersecurity Framework and all the different sections of it. Governance, risk management, risk strategy, asset management, supply chain. We'll talk about protect, identity management, authentication. We'll talk about awareness training. We'll talk about information protection, processes and procedures, data security, maintenance, protective technology. We'll also talk about, under detect, we'll talk about security continuous monitoring, or SOC, security operations monitoring. We'll talk about the detection processes within that, and also anomalies and events and how they play a role. Approximately about 60% of all threats are known, but there are 40% that's not. And a lot of the hacks that happen nowadays are very sophisticated because the threats are very well funded. They have great skills and great resources, and they can find avenues into your organization like we did on the red team at IBM that you would not even be aware of. So it's good to understand all of this information and how it applies, and also give you some strategies on how you can deal with this. We'll talk about response planning, analysis, communications within the responding, mitigation, and making improvements. Always continual improvements. Quality management is very important. And then recovery finally. And we'll talk about recovery planning, again, improvements around that, and communications. Now my next course will be in Chicago. It's going to be September 9th to the 12th. And you can contact MSI TI and book your seat now, because I'm sure that it will fill up quickly. There's a phone number at the top of the screen, and I appreciate you taking the time to sit with me and walk through this introduction to the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, and I wish you all the best and hope to see you in my class. Thank you.